Welcome to Unlearn the Crap TV with your host, Kathy Baldwin. Unlearn the Crap TV is more than just a show. It's a movement towards breaking free from the disempowering structures designed to benefit the few at the expense of the many. It's about education, healing, and unlearning the detrimental beliefs that have been ingrained in society for generations. So now, please welcome the host of Unlearn the Crap TV, Kathy Baldwin.
Welcome to another episode of Unlearn the Crap and Level Up Your Soul is Calling. I'm your host, Kathy Baldwin. As you know, Unlearn the Crap is about the conditioned responses and automatic programming that lead to our thoughts and our beliefs that change our external world and our results. But it's also the interconnected between our brain, our heart, and our gut microbiome, our hormones, our central nervous system, our stress levels, because everything affects everything. We are a very complex, interrelated system, both energetically and physically and spiritually and emotionally. We cannot separate one from the other. And so with Unlearn the Crap, we bring amazing guests on who are here to help you in whatever area of life that you are looking for some help. And today I am so excited to have Amanda Hinman on with us. Amanda, before we get started, what crap did you need to unlearn for you to level up?
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation. But yes, I definitely had to unlearn a bunch of crap about what creates health and vitality. What that looked like for me 10 years ago, or actually about 12 years ago now, I was a fitness instructor, a cardio kickbox teacher. I ate salads and smoothies every day, and I was quote unquote living a very healthy life, or so I thought, based on what I had learned and what society had told me, watching fat, grams of fat that I consumed every day, moving my body until I was dripping sweat in cardio classes, and eating leafy greens, and was blindsided totally when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition and absolutely could not function. I had extreme fatigue, massive insomnia, acne all over my face, hair loss, all of these different things. And it didn't make sense because I thought I was living a very healthy lifestyle. And it wasn't until I started to study functional medicine and went through my own healing journey that I really understood how much, just like you said, everything is interconnected, how much deeper the layers go beyond just what are you putting in your mouth and how are you exercising and moving your body.
And that's exactly why I'm so excited for this conversation, because the crap that we were taught was mainly marketing and not actually biology. Mm-hmm. And it's time to unlearn that. Amanda, now that you've unlearned that, could you tell us how you level up and serve the world?
Yes, absolutely. So now I am the best-selling author of the Thyroid Hormone Solution, founder of the Thyroid Hormone Solution program, where I help women over 40 to get back in touch with their bodies, to have a clear, simple action plan to massively up-level their energy, balance their hormone, mood, and gut symptoms, and feel fantastic. And it's like the greatest passion. My greatest joy is to help these women truly transform their bodies and create a whole new world.
I love that. I love that. Before we get into the science, before we get into the medical, because there's so many things and so many areas we can take this conversation, because I want to talk about the thyroid, but I really want to talk about hormones. But I want to know more about you and your story, because your story sounds like it's the polar opposite of my experience. Because my experience was not so much about health as it was about societal conditioning. I was taught how to be polite and make everyone feel good. And, I had to make sure that I was taught eat everything on the plate and be the last one eating. and that we don't deal with our emotions and we don't deal with stress, and everything gets suppressed because that external world is more important than what's going on inside of us. And so that made me sick. I had hormone issues. I had an autoimmune. I had thyroid issues. And here I am trying to heal my body on the other side of what you went through. So I really want to know your story.
Yes, it's interesting. So there are some ties that we'll see the overlap. But really, like I said, I had come from, you know, a childhood of being very active in sports and extracurriculars. I was a Division I athlete in college, so my worldview was very much focused on exercise and nutrition, eating, you know, like I said, real whole foods and eating healthy foods and moving your body a lot. And I thought that equated to optimal health and peak performance. And then shortly, you know, years after college, when I started having kids and started running around and, you know, being a busy mom, raising daughters, I have 4 daughters. When I was pregnant with my 4th, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which you may know is a thyroid autoimmune condition, Kathy. And this is where essentially I was told by the doctors, you know, your body is attacking itself. And again, everything seemed to be, I was in complete denial. Candidly, I was shocked because I thought I was quote unquote doing everything right to maintain optimal health. And here, how could I have this autoimmune diagnosis and then be told that likely I would have future diagnoses down the road to follow? Because once you have one autoimmune, more are at a much higher likelihood down the road. And that was one piece of the puzzle. I started working with a naturopathic doctor who ran a bunch of functional tests and gave me a list of, you know, about 15 supplements to start taking every day, and told me all these foods that I needed to eliminate. And at first I went into my action-oriented mode and was like, okay, we can tackle this problem. I'm going to solve this. I'm going to follow the recipe. And that led to more and more resentment, honestly, Kathy, because I felt very deprived. I never really understood the why, how this happened, what brought this about. There was no connection or education around the neuroscience of how some of my worldviews and the things I was like, you know, my earlier life experiences were shaping my nervous system, and definitely no kind of guidance in a holistic way. It was more of just like, here's a list of foods to eliminate, here's the pills to start swallowing, which isn't that different from conventional medicine that typically tends to treat or manage disease with pills. And so that became very frustrating. And fast forward a few months after my diagnosis, my oldest daughter, who was 8 years old at the time and had always been a highly sensitive, highly intelligent, like witty little girl, her anxiety increased massively to the point where she was having between 10, even sometimes up to 15 seizures in a single day. And that was a whole nother ballgame. An 8-year-old, yes. And like my diagnosis was, I'll say it was hard, it was challenging, but it felt like a mere inconvenience compared to what she was going through. Like every single day, she would wake up, and usually within the first 15 minutes of being awake, when she had that cortisol awakening response and hormones surging through her body, she would start to seize. I never knew if she was going to make it through the next 24 hours. It was completely terrifying as a mom, and feeling so helpless to see your child in this situation. She was taking 12 pills a day as an 8-year-old, again, just to be able to make it 24 hours without having another seizure. And we were told by, you know, numerous pediatric neurologists who were running all of the tests and looking at everything that there's no definitive cause other than sometimes this is genetic, and she will likely never drive a car because you definitely cannot drive on that level of medication. And just to kind of prepare for life as managing this epilepsy. And I tell you, Kathy,
is that medical speak for we don't know what's causing this?
I mean, I hate to say it. I'm not trying to bash the medical community, because I do think they work within the scope of what they're trained and what the capacity is, but they're just not looking at the whole interconnected picture. They're not taught. I mean, I'm great friends with some doctors and nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. I work with them all the time, but they don't have, their formal education does not have the same lens as the functional medicine lens.
Absolutely.
But anyway, during that journey, I was like, every single fiber of my being knew there has to be more to the story here, especially to help my daughter and myself. And that's when I went back to school to study functional medicine, which really looks at the interconnectedness, the biology, the neurology, looks at how our immune system is communicating with the hormone, the endocrine system, and the nervous system, and all the different pieces. And who is this person, this individual? What are the life circumstances, the lived experiences, and their environment that are all contributing to either create a blockage, an impairment, or a depletion? And more importantly, what is it that we can actually affect? What's something that we can do something with and start to rebuild health? And so that journey allowed us to both radically transform. My daughter weaned off of all of her medication in under 9 months, has been seizure-free ever since. She's now a 20-year-old studying physics at the University of Notre Dame. I have been medication-free for over 10 years. So it was really applying this like holistic healing, building health approach to ourselves first that gave me this, like, lit a fire under me. I feel like it was a divine direction. I didn't have a business. I came from accounting before this, but it was like, okay, more people need to know that we can bring our bodies and our hormones into balance in a way that is really enlivening.
Absolutely. I know when I started my journey, and first of all, let me say, thank God you and your daughter are fine and you got to the root cause. And I'm really excited that you took something so earth shattering and turned it into empowerment and a gift that you're bringing to the world. I mean, that is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to take these things that happen to us and not let them break us, but use them for fuel. And you are such a beautiful example of that. So thank you before I go on to my next part of this. But
thank you.
When I first started getting sick, I had IBS and I had ulcers and I had weight gain and fatigue and body aches. And I had all of these issues. And actually, I'll tell you this funny story. I was a smoker. I grew up in a world where everybody smoked. So I was a smoker. And I got to the point where I couldn't walk upstairs to go to bed at night without heaving. Oh, I couldn't catch my breath. It would be like 10 minutes and my heart was racing. I thought, I'm in my 30s. What on earth am I this sick? So I quit smoking, thinking, okay, it's that. That didn't work. I quit caffeine. I got rid of the Diet Cokes. I got rid of the aspartame. I started cleansing my life, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Go to the doctor and find out that I have a thyroid issue. So what they do is they gave me pills and reversed my hyper to hypo. and
went the wrong way,
Yeah, because you turn into a science experiment when you first start going under medications, right? Because we're all so unique. And I didn't believe that was the root cause. And so even though I was on these pills for a long time, I kept searching. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't, every part of me is saying this is not right. And I listened to myself and I went and found an energy healer. And this energy healer was healing me. And I finally took myself off of the meds. And then I went to the doctor and I said, I'm off the meds. Please do some blood work. And the doctor, now he was an older doctor and he was old school. And he's like, you did what? You're not supposed to do that without consulting me. And he comes back and he says, okay, whatever you're doing is working. Your blood work is perfect. I don't believe in this witchcraft that you're doing, but we'll test you. And after about 6 months of monthly testing, he said, okay, I don't know why it doesn't make sense, but you don't need the pills anymore.
That's
How
great.
many stories do you hear like that, where when we take a hold and trust ourselves and say, doesn't feel good?
Well, you're exactly right, Kathy. It's really, I feel like the invitation when we have a health challenge or a health struggle, first and foremost, it's beautiful because our hormones act as the messenger molecules in the body, right? They really are sensitive, and they're meant to signal usually through some type of unwanted symptom. In your case, it was the wheezing, right? It was the can't breathe when I'm going up the stairs and all the other things. They signal through symptoms, hey, like, pay attention over here. There's something I want you to learn, or something I want you to understand, and kind of, really appreciate, learn to love about yourself more. And that's what I think the journey of healing is, and building health. It truly is. Yes, there are tactical things. We have to talk about what amino acids your cells need, and what type of specific minerals and things that are going to activate thyroid action. But the deeper layer is learning about yourself and appreciating and loving who you are and how you show up in the world in a new and different relationship. And that's when the body thrives. That's when the body heals. So exactly. I love that you had this invitation, this opportunity to like trust yourself and lean into energy healing that was inspired to you, and that was really piquing your passion, your interest, and that allowed healing to happen.
Well, don't give me too much credit, because it took me another 20 years before I finally got the lesson that my body was talking to me, and that all of my symptoms was a language. Could you talk about the language of hormones and what
Yes.
it feels like? Because I truly believe if we became intuitive and actually listened, we would not need the 2x4 across the head that our society is going through right now. We have epidemic stress. We have epidemic burnout. We have mental health going crazy across everybody. And I believe it's because our systems took us away from listening internally and trusting externally.
I would agree with that. I do. I have a similar sentiment that it's a balance, right? It's not about becoming so closed out to any external feedback, yet it's not abdicating your agency and your knowledge or your advocacy to others and professionals, even if it's somebody who wears a white coat, right? Who's highly educated. Yes, but I would say in particular, I'll talk a little bit about hormones. You mentioned how our hormones signal to us. And I'll share this through a client that I'm working with right now. Her name is Corey. So she came to me because she's like, Amanda, I've been watching you on Instagram for a while. You definitely piqued my interest when you talked about like being able to lose 15 pounds and, under 12 weeks, and how you can predictably, like, essentially it's getting your metabolism back into gear, right? So it's kick-starting the metabolism, because there are so many ways that our metabolism just is actually signaling to store fat as a protective mechanism, not because something's wrong with our body. It's because our body is miscued and we're not working with it in collaboration, right? So she's like, I've been watching you for a while. I've had this weight gain around my waist. She was on Lexapro for anxiety. She's like, I'm noticing that I have less and less tolerance for my kids. She's like, I love my 3 kids, but I just don't have the mental bandwidth and the tolerance. Brain fog. She's an attorney, very, high powered job, successful. She's like, I need to be mentally sharp to be on my game for my professional career. And it's starting to feel like I can't remember things. I can't recall things in the same way. So a variety of different factors, right? And she's like, I'm assuming, she's like, I took your hormone health assessment, and this is something I'm happy to share with any of your listeners, my free hormone health assessment. And she's like, based on that, she's like, I assumed that my cortisol was through the roof. I have so much stress. My kids are going different directions. Like I said, a high-powered job. Definitely know that I'm not doing the best on nutrition, but we do a fairly decent job, like trying to meal plan and stuff during the week. But she's like, I really don't know what else it could be. And it's probably my stress levels are just out of the roof. Well, when we actually looked at her assessment and we actually did I always say it's good to test rather than guess, because you could be coming up with things that are not actually accurate. She found that her cortisol level was like rock bottom. She didn't even have a typical cortisol awakening response, which we would expect you to have in the morning. No wonder she was like running on fumes. No wonder her body wasn't able to like recharge. So again, through the symptom of how they show up in the body, this hormone assessment will give you kind of the top 6 metabolic hormones, different cues and clues to look out for. So at least you know where to start. So once we knew for her, it was a matter of suppressed cortisol and underperforming cortisol, which led to, for her also, elevated estrogen, even though she's in perimenopause, very close to menopause. She had gone 10 months with no cycle. So she's like, I may be in menopause. Well, no, she actually had elevated signs of estrogen. It was just that her body was not able to properly detoxify and remove the estrogen, which was interfering with other hormones. So they all work together in this kind of symphony. But if one gets, it's kind of like a 3-legged stool. And if one side of the stool is chopped off, halfway, it's going to throw the whole stool out of balance. And that's what can happen with our hormones. Another way that this shows up for Corey and for many women that I work with is, she's like, we were talking about getting in protein. One of the key things to fire up your metabolism is to start to nourish with protein enriched meals, especially earlier in the day during your wakeful hours. And she's like, I'm not even hungry for breakfast, Amanda. I wake up and I can just, get the kids out of the house, have my cup of coffee, get on the train. I don't even normally eat my first meal until like 11 a.m. And I thought that was good because it's intermittent fasting. And I said, well, Corey, unfortunately, the most recent studies that were not done on men, but were done on women, actually show that women over 40, that can be a real detriment, because you want to match your nourishment to your demand of the day. And if you go into that cortisol awakening response, if you go into that early activity in your day, whether mental activity or physical, unfed in a fasted state, you're already predisposing your body to be in fight or flight response, that sympathetic state, more the rest of the day, because it's getting the signal. It's down regulating your hunger cues. So no wonder you don't feel hungry, but it's getting the signal of, holy cow, we have to really use our resources to prepare to fight or to flee. It's not saying like, oh, we've got plenty of nourishment here, plenty of fuel here to meet our demands. So like little distinctions. She's like, I really honestly didn't know these like the kind of what I call 2 millimeter distinctions that were relevant for her unique situation, her life, and her body now at this age, at this stage. The great thing is, when getting this information, when having a streamlined process and some coaching and support, I mean, she's down over 12 pounds. She's like, my brain fog is eliminated. I have no more bloating. She's like, I cannot tell you how, like, I feel like a new person. It's so different. And it didn't even happen with radical, overwhelming changes. It's just like, let's be really strategic and focus where you're going to get the biggest impact. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That is fantastic. But I'm curious, because we're hearing about intermittent fasting all the time. And I know that I have experimented with it. And to be really transparent, I'm on a 3-day fast right now. I'm on day 2 with 0. I've only had water. So can we talk about intermittent fasting and a full fast, like what I'm going through right now?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are different, so doing a full fast is a little bit different mechanism that starts to activate in the body than when you do intermittent fasting. They both have different kind of intended purposes and resources. The biggest thing is that when you want to match when you're nourishing, right? Not on your full fast days. If you're going for 3 or more days of only water, that's a different intention typically, and a different impact in the body. But when you're focusing your nourishment on specific hours or time frame during a 24-hour period, it's really critical for women particularly that they match that time frame with their active time frame. So it's most important to do typically it doesn't have to be a large meal, but some type of nourishment within the first 120 minutes of waking, so that as your cortisol is rising, as you're entering the day and kind of brain is turning on and you're getting into emails or doing your commute to work or whatever you're doing, or some people like to get their activity in the morning. Before you do that activity, you have some fuel for that movement. And then it's actually, studies show it's better to curb your eating earlier in the evening and have your fasting start at maybe 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m., and then go until the morning wake time, rather than what a lot of women do is they skip breakfast and they start eating later, and then will eat, later into the evening.
Is that different for women than it is for men?
100%. Absolutely. And the studies did not use to separate that. So previously, before about like 8 to 10 years ago, the studies were done on a broad scale population, which had predominant men in the studies. And that's why they assumed that intermittent fasting would be equally effective for women. The difference, and it's a very marked difference, is after 40, women's hormone levels shift rapidly. Whereas men, they have a more gradual decline in testosterone and different hormone levels. Women have a period of time where it's fluctuating, especially estrogen, but they have a much more rapid descent. And so the cortisol axis, the adrenal axis, is already shifting and navigating and creating a kind of a new rhythm and a new relationship with managing stress and immunity because of that rapid change of the sex hormones. That men don't have that. Theirs is more of a gradual decline, so they don't have the same effect in the whole body.
Is that stable between premenopause and postmenopause?
Let me just clarify what your question is. Is what stable? Which part of which?
Are estrogen levels moving so fast that we need to account for it? Is it because, as you're talking about estrogen, I'm in menopause. Well, I actually have a full hysterectomy. So there's a lot of women out there who have had issues like me. So Absolutely. Is it different after menopause?
It can be different. However, just having a low sex hormone balance, which is the case after menopause for women, most women, although I will say, I'm always cautioned to assume that your estrogen is really, really low, even if you're menopausal, because body fat in general can produce its own estrogen. You don't necessarily need ovaries to produce.
Well, I got lots of that going on.
Well, I'm just like, so sometimes women are like, oh no, I haven't had a cycle. I haven't had a period in 3 years. I'm in menopause. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's still look at where your hormone levels are, because you may not have very much progesterone, if any. And usually they're not going to have ovulating, like, obviously like childbearing years of estrogen, but they oftentimes more estrogen than they realize, because it can come from adipose fatty tissue, creates its own estrogen, right? So I never want to assume without actually knowing where our levels are and where the body is at. But to answer your question about the intermittent fasting, when you're not having the buffer of sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone in particular, when you don't have that kind of cushion or that kind of wiggle room, it's just honestly, there's more personal responsibility with how we are supporting our adrenals. And that can look like I use brain science with my clients. It can look like energy healing. It can look like nervous system rewiring. It can look like a variety of different ways that you essentially give your nervous system more of a balance and a break. Because if we just live in today's society, the average human is going to be massively overstimulated in their nervous system, whether that be stimulation from toxins in our environment, whether that be stimulation from the type and quality of food that we're putting in our mouth, whether that be stimulation from the frustrating conversation that we just had with our son or daughter about, some of their choices after college, or whatever it is, right? Or an ailing, aging parent that we're worried about. The average human has a very activated nervous system until it becomes so overactivated that now it's suppressed, because their body can't even synthesize enough cortisol to keep up with the demand, right? That we can have that slip. But in general, with the intermittent fasting part, I would say, again, I really want to get a handle of what does your adrenal picture look like? Is that actually going to be effective for your metabolism, or is it likely going to perhaps give the wrong signal to your metabolism of ooh, we don't have much fuel here, so we need to conserve?
So you've brought up a point that I am really fascinated with, because the old crap we were taught was calories in, calories out, and exercise will take care of everything. We weren't taught about our metabolism. We weren't taught about our central nervous system. We weren't taught about the stress hormone and how our digestion slows down when we are in our sympathetic nervous system. Mm-hmm. We weren't taught about any of these things, I want to stay with the topic of estrogen because I want to move it to men. We all have all of the hormones, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So when men have elevated estrogen,
yes,
what does that look like in their body, and how does that affect their metabolism?
So for men, what that can look like is actually when it looks like actually tissue development where they carry weight around. If you know how some men can look like they almost like they have breast development or tissue development, that's definitely a sign of perhaps excess estrogen. Most commonly, it comes for men and women. One of the biggest, I guess, sources of kind of excess estrogen or I don't want to say excess because it's not like men have ovaries that are producing massive amounts of estrogen by any means. But really what happens is the body does not properly process or detoxify hormones such as estrogen. For example, if we have slow clearance of our hormones because the liver is not able to effectively package it up and then excrete it from the body, this is where we can get things like men that look like they're developing almost like fatty breasts or different things like that, and other symptoms. Also can affect mood. It can affect mental clarity. There's a lot of different symptoms that can look like. But where I'm interested is like, okay, what is the health of your gut? You've mentioned gut microbiome, right? So in the gut, we have a specific type of enzyme called beta glucuronidase that is important to have. Everybody has some of this. And that is important to have some of it. However, if we eat certain foods like simple carbohydrates, for example, are foods that can increase the number and quantity of this enzyme beta glucuronidase in our gut. If we eat those types of processed foods or simple carbs and things like that, what that does is then it decouples. It's almost like, think of it this way, Kathy. It's almost like if somebody put all of the garbage in your kitchen when you're, living your life and your family's moving around, they put it in the garbage bag in the kitchen. And then on the way from the kitchen, moving it out to the curb where the garbage man is going to come pick it up, the bag rips and is opened up and everything spills all over the kitchen floor. If we have too much of this beta glucuronidase enzyme in our gut, it's like it took that coupled up, kind of packaged up hormone that was meant to be excreted and make its way out to the trash and like ripped it open and opened up the conjugated bond. And now that estrogen is floating around to get reabsorbed right back into the bloodstream. So again, it goes back to, this is kind of a long, fancy way of saying what you eat does affect your gut health, and it can affect your hormone balance in profound ways as well. So this is why it's a holistic effect. So a lot of times for men, if they do have excess estrogen, it's because of perhaps a gut microbe imbalance with the type or quantity and or lack of key nutrients that are needed to fully remove and detoxify these estrogen metabolites. They just don't have enough of, for example, certain B vitamins that your liver needs in order to remove them and flush it out of the system. If we don't have those, then that part of the process doesn't occur. And so the estrogen gets reabsorbed back into the body.
Wow. This is one of those conversations that I am so grateful that you are here and having, because one of the things that I talked about through all like my first book and everything else is the fact that how our body is meant to process hormones and neurotransmitters and all of the chemicals, because we are biochemical beings. And yes. I love the way you explained how that whole system works. I have belly fat. It's always been there since teenage years. And we have figured out that I have been chronically stressed and cortisol overload for the majority of my life. And I believe, tell me if I'm right or wrong, what I've heard is that stress resides in the belly fat. Is that true?
Well, so I would phrase it slightly different, but you're getting to the same kind of fundamental.
Well, I'm not a functional doctor.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily that stress is residing there. But what happens is when we have a buildup of cortisol, or think of it this way, if I'm going to use another like kind of simplified analogy without getting too technical here, but essentially like cortisol is like a stick shift in your car, or like a gas pedal in your car to like ramp up certain processes, right? To like prepare us to fight or to flee or to be ready for attack, right? Physiologically speaking, even if it's just a conversation, that's not like you're in physical danger. Your body doesn't know the difference. So every time we are stepping on the gas pedal, that means there's a lot of activity that's happening inside the body. Like a ton of metabolic processes are firing and wiring, and all of this activity is getting ready and happening inside the body. Well, when we have, and I'm going to get a little bit technical, but when we have underpowered cells, and this, I literally just did a training for my clients on this last week. We were talking about the key and like showing some graphics of what does an underpowered cell, that's the core of metabolism. Metabolism, essentially, when we have cells that are underpowered, which means the mitochondria, the energy factory part of the inside of the cell, is very inefficient at taking food substrate, which is what comes in from our mouth, our food and our liquids, and turning it into usable energy, a molecule of ATP that can be used to do any function that's necessary in the body, right? So whether we're talking about an eye cell that helps you to see, a visual processing cell, whether we're talking about a kidney cell, whether we're talking about a thyroid cell, all the different cells in our body are designed to do their job, and they have a specific job to do. But any one of those cells can be an underpowered cell. So I can have an underpowered thyroid cell, which means that thyroid cell can't produce thyroid hormone very efficiently. I can have an underpowered, cell in my eye, which means that that cell cannot process and reflect light very efficiently. It can't do its job. All these cells, when they're underpowered, can't do their job effectively. And when we have underpowered cells, essentially that cell creates a really little bit of energy for all the work, but it has a lot of waste and metabolic waste, because that is so much chemical reactions trying to get, it's kind of like a rusty conveyor belt in a factory, right? It's not working at high speed. It's not like this high speed, high technologically streamlined conveyor belt that's just cranking out products. A underpowered cell is making a couple of like rusty parts with a lot of waste product. When we have underpowered cells, there's a lot of waste, and that waste can become toxic if it's not excreted. So what the body does in its own wisdom, it's actually trying to protect you. It will say, wow, we've got all this metabolic waste floating around from all these underperforming cells. We're going to take that waste and bubble wrap it in a fat cell so it cannot cause more inflammation. So when we have waste around the midsection, essentially that's bubble wrapped toxins, because your body has been pushing on the gas pedal for a long time, creating a lot of toxins as a byproduct from all the like hustle and bustle of we got to be ready, we got to be on high alert, we got to be ready. And then the body says, what do we do with all these metabolic waste that's hanging out? We got to bubble wrap it so it doesn't cause more inflammation and stick it somewhere. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that analogy. So part of what gave me that chronic stress was the crap belief that I'll sleep when I'm dead, put on my big girl panties, do it all. Everybody comes first, be superwoman, take care of everything and everybody. And my self-care was always put to the last. I know I'm not an anomaly.
Nope.
that is our culture, how we were trained. So how do we clean our house? Because I did hear, and I love this, is I was yo-yo dieting. I can lose weight, no problem. I've stopped dieting because everything for me is about root cause right now. Unlearn the crap is about unlearning the root causes of my beliefs and my thoughts and everything that took me into disempowerment. So now I'm working on the root cause of what's wrong with my body and getting myself to health, because I believe that when we focus in on health, then the body knows what to do with the weight.
Yes, I would agree.
How do we do
Yeah.
that?
Oh, you had a question. I was like, is there a question there? Yeah. So how do we do that?
No.
How do
Well, first I wanted your opinion on it, but I want to tie it to one other thing, and then I want you to go with that. One of
Okay.
the instrumental people in my life was Dr. Bruce Lipton, where he
Mhm.
talked about our cellular environment. And when we change the environment, we change the DNA and we change the expression of that.
Mhm.
How do we change the environment that is creating all this waste and bubble wrapping it and storing it all there because I'm tired of being efficient?
Yes, yes, yes. So great. I love that you're asking this question, Kathy. And this actually is it's literally step 4 in my 5-step process that I've been teaching and working with clients for years. It is, well, so we look at the root cause. What is the root cause in your specific body? Where are your hormones at? Where are your symptoms telling you? Where are they giving you red flares to pay attention over here? Then we look at replenished key nutrients, because every single cell is nutrient dependent. So we have to look at, are there glaring gaps? Like, no wonder your cell can't do what it's designed to do, because you don't even have the nutrient cofactors for it to function. It's kind of like, did you even put gas in the car? Can the car go? Let's solve that problem first, right? Step 3 is restored digestion, because again, I just talked a little bit about gut health and how what's happening in our gut and our digestion is such a critical piece. Because in my case, you can put the salads and the smoothies in the mouth, but if you're not actually digesting it and making it absorbable, it's never getting to the cell anyway. So we have to make sure we're optimizing that piece. And then step 4, I titled it Reset Your Thoughts. Because here's the reality is we do all have baggage, emotional baggage from our past experience, whether we're conscious of it or not, it's there. Some of it is inherited from our, like you said, our family, our culture, kind of our society as a whole, that until we explore that, until we can become curious about it. So step 4 is where we actually bring in the brain science and we look at doing some neurological reprogramming, which first involves identifying where are the spaces and the kind of the patterns in your life of where you feel overwhelmed, where you feel guilty, what triggers you to feel ashamed, what triggers you to feel sad. Like, we look at some of those core key emotions and we do like what I call like an emotion audit on what are, because there's always patterns. There's always patterns of like, what are the areas in your life, whether it shows up in your personal relationship, whether it shows up in your professional career trajectory or business or path, whether it shows up with your spouse, whether it shows up with your health. There are patterns to some of the underlying root beliefs that we've accepted. And I actually train on Bruce Lipton's work. I share that information with my clients too, because these programs were downloaded before we were even consciously aware of them. It's not like there's no fault, because it's not like you made a choice of, you know what? Yeah, I think I'll hold on to that program of I'm never going to be good enough and put that in my brain. No. These were not intentional. This was not happening on purpose. However, until you can see it, you cannot then know how to shift it and transmute it. Right. So a lot of the work that we do, once we kind of get a foundation of like, okay, we're getting the cells, the core of some of the key things that they need to work well. Now let's make sure we're going to the deeper layers of getting into that neuroscience and really identifying where are the patterns that are tripping your nervous system over and over and over and over again, so that we can rebuild new relationship with those patterns. And then that gives you, I think, if I always say, like, if your nervous system had a bandwidth or a margin of like this much error, if life is a-okay, you're good. But if it goes a little bit off, you're thrown into fight or flight. What we want to do is we want to widen that margin. So you can have a lot more things happening or thrown at you. And yeah, it may not be comfortable, but you can very quickly get right back into parasympathetic activation, find that balance, be grounded, be centered, feel calm, and have that ultimate faith that life is working for you, not against you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We got to circle back to something you said, because this is a conversation that I've had so many times, but I want to hear it from your perspective. Emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Emotions are a language that tells us, but they are also what sets off the programs in our brains. The emotion is the first thing that tells our programming, our amygdala, our central nervous system. Okay, this emotion of fear, this emotion of this, do that, do this, and it sets off the chain reactions. It
Yes.
also creates those hormones and those chemicals that are going through our body. Can you talk about the energetic and hormonal connection between emotions and our health?
Yes. In fact, I'm like two of these parts of a conversation. I'm like, I wish I could show a graphic right now because I have graphics in my book that demonstrate this. So there's a beautiful graphic that, and I'm going to kind of talk through it. I call it the HPAT axis of connection, right? And what that stands for is H is for hypothalamus, which is located in the brain. That is really the central interpreter of our thoughts and our beliefs and our perceptions, our worldview, essentially, how we are synthesizing all of the inputs from our eyes, from our nose, from our mouth, from our touch, all the different sensory inputs. It's coming into the body. The hypothalamus is interpreting it and giving it meaning. Then that's at the top of the hierarchy. Then that's going to, and that signals the emotion, right? And that's going to signal down to the pituitary. Now, the pituitary gland is going to be in charge of regulating the endocrine system. When we talked about all those biochemical responses, right? It's going to say, okay, wow, based on this circumstance, I just had a circumstance where the Amazon guy came to my door, rang my doorbell, and holy cow, he dropped off something that was a beautiful bouquet of flowers or something that I did not expect. And like, I'm joyful, I'm happy because the story, the meaning that I gave to that situation or circumstance is like, wow, somebody loved me and spontaneously thought of sending me this beautiful gift, right? That's going to release a whole different cascade of hormones through my body than if I had thought like, oh no, I just had somebody at the door who told me that my daughter got into a tragic car accident, right? Very different scenario, very different response. That's going to signal down to the adrenals, HPA, adrenals. That is those organs located above the kidneys that regulate stress and immunity, fight or flight, and essentially what is that bigger, like I said, cortisol response, norepinephrine, epinephrine, adrenaline response in the body. And then it goes down to the thyroid, which regulates metabolism. So you can see, and then it goes down eventually to the ovaries, the gonadal sex hormones. But you can see what's at the very top is the hypothalamus. And that is really the center of our thoughts and our perceptions. What you're talking about is emotion. So there's a beautiful quote by Charles Swindoll. He says, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you respond to it or react to it. And it's like, what's the meaning that we're giving to circumstances? What's the meaning that we're giving to situations? What's the meaning, which then defines the emotional response? And that's going to signal that whole cascade physiologically in the body.
Yes, yes. For those who are listening to this rather than watching it, you would not have seen me light up and become so enamored right after you talked about the hypothalamus is what creates meaning. Because that is where our power is. When we change the story, when we change the meaning, and the way I do it is through using the universal law of relativity and finding a different perspective, because anything and everything is neutral until we give it the story. And the story is either empowering or is it disempowering? I want to go back to that example that you gave of the doorbell ringing, because that doorbell ringing can have its own story based on our pre-lived experience. Oh no, the doorbell rings, something bad has happened. Oh no, the doorbells ring, something wonderful has happened.
Yep.
Right?
We get, especially when there's a strong emotional impact, it's something that we are have like a strong reaction to, a neuroassociation. It gets wired, it gets like hardwired in with that trigger, right? Whether the trigger be the doorbell or something else. And sometimes we don't even realize it. People have triggers all the time about walking in the kitchen and going to the fridge automatically. They're not even like consciously thinking about it, but maybe they've done that so habitually and so repeated that it's like an automatic pattern before they have conscious agency over their behavior.
Yeah. And that's where our power is the conscious awareness and the conscious choice, because while it's unconscious, it can remain a habit that runs on autopilot.
Yes.
Once it becomes conscious, now it becomes a choice.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to circle back to another thing, because every time you say something, my brain goes and says, we could go here, 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 all these different topics, because you are giving us so much amazing information. I have been told that the egg that formed me resided in my grandmother. And I believe in, and I don't know if it's scientifically proven or not, but it goes with Bruce Lipton, it goes with all the other research and everything I've done, that the fetus is growing in an environment of chemicals and hormones, and it is affected by the environment that it is growing in.
Yes.
And so you were talking about us coming into this world with these beliefs and thoughts, but we also come with this program that's right into our cells. And so we've got ancestors who went through war, who went through depression, who went through the Holocaust, who went through all of these traumas. And we might not be aware of them, but our cells remember.
Yes. I do agree with that. So it's really, and it's a matter of looking beyond just, like you said, our individual remembered past experience. It's something beyond just what we can mentally recall. It's at a physiological, energetic level. And it is true, like science shows that cells are shifted depending on the environment that they're living in, right? So if a cell is living in a pool that's bathed in chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol and stress hormone, that cell is going to learn how to survive and learn how to function differently than if a cell is in a pool of different, serotonin and different other chemicals around it that are signaling safety, that are signaling abundance, that are signaling well-being, right? So it is important, I think, that when we look at whole health, there's an awareness of not only our lived experience, but what are some of the things that we could unpack. And I believe that sometimes it can be hard and uncomfortable, and it seems like perhaps maybe a disadvantage to have inherited certain energetic tendencies or predispositions, if you will. I also think that that's what makes our soul and our lived experience unique. Like we each get this almost like pre-built in curriculum that's kind of like, I think of like the maze runner, that like we get to figure out the maze of life, which is our life journey, right? And that's what makes it can make it fun, it can make it intriguing, it can make it exciting, it can make it rewarding. And without that, it's just kind of bland. It can blank slate. There's nothing to build from. There's no like juice of, that's what makes you have your strong preferences and your strong desires and your strong like passions too, as well as perhaps the challenges and the obstacles and the hurdles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it all depends on the story of how we think about those challenges. Do we think about those challenges as opportunities to hone our zone of genius, or do we use it as feeling that we're being punished by what's around us? I have a question that I want to connect, because I love how you talk about every aspect. We know with neuroplasticity that we can rewire our thoughts. We can take the crap and release it with our thoughts and feelings and change our behaviors and our outcomes. We know that our body replaces every single cell in our body every 7 years. How do we reprogram those cells so that when they replicate, we get the desired result we want. We get the body that is running efficiently and healthy, and it's optimized.
Well, I think I would go back to it's a holistic approach, right? I think wholeheartedly, if you're looking at doing some work to become aware of maybe like ancestral patterns or different energetic past experiences, mentally, emotionally, or that could have affected you, but you're not changing the physiological environment because you don't have the right nutrients, you don't have the right clean ingredients, you don't have other good quality sleep and movement, you're only doing a sliver of the picture, and vice versa. If you're just looking at, taking supplements, optimizing food, but you're not looking at the neurological nervous system components, you're only doing a sliver of the puzzle. So it's really of like, where are we stepping into? I guess to me, Kathy, the opportunity and the invitation for anyone who's here, who's listening, who's inspired, is to say, really do like a self-reflection of where am I fully supported in perhaps a loving accountability, have relationship, have continued inspiration and education so that I can feel like I'm learning and growing and inspired in my life in the health arenas, and where is something that's missing? Where is it like, oh, maybe I've done great with kind of the, personal development, conscious awareness piece or the energetics, but I haven't done so great with the movement and the nutrition. Or maybe I've done really good with the movement or the sleep, but I haven't really done a good job of giving myself permission to have self-care and actually, do some own inner reflection and deeper soul work. So where's the area for you that gets to be enhanced? Where's the area that you get to lean into to fully maximize your health and vitality for the long term? Because we all need the holistic approach. And that's why when I went to work with a naturopathic doctor many years ago, it didn't actually have any sustainable results. I got better for a period of time and then fell right back off because the resentment, the patterns of judgment around myself and my family and self-deprivation, like that was still that was still happening, right? I didn't change those because I was unaware of those. And I didn't even know how in the world that affected my health. And vice versa. Some people are like, hey, I'm really, really good. I've done a lot of soul work. I've done a lot of, Akashic records, a lot of energetic healing, but they haven't been so dialed in on their movement. So their cells are not getting, they're insulin resistant. They're not getting good quality fuel, right? I haven't done so great on the clean nourishment and those pieces too. So it's a holistic approach.
Absolutely. And where we can put our focus in on everything, we can't put our focus in on everything all at the same time. So we are never going to be in balance. And that's part of the homeostasis of life, not just our body, is to recognize when we are going outside and find those resources, those tools, that nourishment, that whatever it is we need, whether it is our mind, our heart, our body, our health, our wealth, it really doesn't matter, because nothing operates in isolation, right?
Correct. Yes. And when you lean in and really expand one area, everything benefits.
Absolutely. So for those people who are listening, Amanda, and they're saying, okay, this makes perfect sense. I understand why I'm getting the results that I'm getting, and I am ready to seize my empowerment, seize my life, and own my health. How do they reach out to you? How can you help them?
Two things. I would say first and foremost, you can start with the simplest free gift is I'll gift my free hormone assessment. Get some part of a piece of like, what is my hormone signaling to me? Where should I be leaning in and paying attention, right? So I'll give you that link, Kathy. You can put that in the show notes for the thyroid hormone assessment. The other thing is, feel free to pick up my book on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, online. You can pick it up. It's called the Thyroid Hormone Solution, a 5-step plan to balance your hormones naturally by Amanda Hinman. So you can find that online at any, online retailer. And that's a great tool. If you're like, you know what, I really just want a good read that's going to give me inspiration, some practical steps that you can do at home today, this is a good tool for you to get into action.
That's wonderful. But what if they want more? What if I want more?
Yeah, definitely. So I always have an open, you can always apply to become one of the private clients. I work with women for 5 months in the Thyroid Hormone Solution. We do one of these steps every single month. And I really take it personally to do hand holding to make sure that my clients have exceptional results. We have, like I said, women releasing weight that they've never, like 20 pounds that they've never done before. Women who have completely transformed their cardiac scores, their cholesterol scores, their bone density scores, their, all of their symptoms. The average or minimum, I should say, is 72% symptom improvement in 5 months. So if you're in that place where you're like, you know what, I just want this year to be a year that I lean in and I say yes to myself and to my health, then I would encourage you to apply to have a free hormone health review. And that's a chance where we can get to connect. I learn more about your unique situation, your health goals, what your challenges have been. And if it's a fit, then I can tell you how I partner with women to help them create the goals that they want.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. I believe with every ounce of my fiber that we are in a massive paradigm shift. The world is changing astronomically. All of our systems, our medical, our government, our economic, our education, everything is in flux. And that is calling each and every one of us to level up to the very best version of us so that we can bring our gifts to the world. And if we're sick, if we're depleted, if we can barely make it through the day, there is no way we can bring our best to this world. And so we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our families, we owe it to our society, and we owe it to the collective to take care of ourselves.
Yes. I agree with you.
I am grateful that you are a part of that. And I am so honored and grateful that you were a part of this conversation. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do. Thank you, Amanda, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kathy.
Until next time, remember to challenge everything so that you can achieve anything, because your soul is calling you to level up and you are worth it. My name is Kathy Baldwin. This has been another episode of Unlearn the Crap and Level Up Your Soul is Calling. And I can't wait to see you on the next show. Thank you, Amanda. If this hit home, don't just listen, level up. Subscribe to the show. Drop me a 5-star review or share it with someone who's done playing small. Then head over to my website, kathybaldwin.me. That's where the real magic happens. You'll find my books, my podcast, and all the tools to help you reclaim your voice, rewrite your patterns, and level up into the version of you that you have been waiting for. Your soul isn't whispering anymore. It's roaring. And this is just the beginning.